so I might have done a thing. Yeah. So I kind of did some shopping. I spent a lot of time in my previous day job using air tools, especially an air sander. I had a Mercer, it was very nice. And I kind of learned that the best thing about the air sanders is the really low profile, and the fact that with an electric sander there's a big motor and you're quite high up, but an air sander tends to be quite low down and it's a lot more comfortable and a lot more manageable. Also, I kind of want to be able to spray stuff, so I've bought myself an air compressor. Now I do already have an air compressor, but it's quite small and it could just about cope with spraying guitars, but it's not very good. And it really can't cope with air tools, especially a sander, because they use quite a lot of air. So this arrived this morning whilst I was at work. The box is, what's the word? I think the correct word to describe the box would demonetize this video, so I'm going to say not very good. However, I think I'm going to just make this cardboard disappear and have a proper look at the compressor, and we'll figure out what's going on with it. So let's do that now. I think we'll just do it kind of a magic trick. So just... there we go. So this is a RocwooD 50 litre quiet air compressor. I did a bit of shopping around and I was looking at I think it's pronounced Hyundai. There are currently adverts on the TV which are telling me that. They're relating to the cars mostly, but it's not Hyundai or Hyundai, it's Hyundai. We got sidetracked there, what was I on about? Oh yeah, I was looking at the Hyundai 50 litre silent compressor. I think it's called the super silent. It's not, they're never silent, but they're supposed to be a lot quieter. Now, for a reference, I will turn on my current air compressor at some point. We'll see how quiet this is. But apparently, it's not quite as quiet as the Hyundai, but it's a hell of a lot quieter than my normal air compressor, supposedly. It's also a 50 litre tank. The spec that it said, I'll kind of put some pictures up or I'll type it out when I find it all, because I can't remember it all off the top of my head. It was a slightly higher CFM, so airflow, than the Hyundai. It was very slightly higher pressure capable, so the Hyundai could do, I think it was rated at 100 psi, or just shy of 8 bar, I believe. It's about 7 bar, whereas this claims it will pressurise to 8 bar or 116 psi, I think that is, something around that. Which I'd like it to run at 100 psi pretty much constantly, which means I want it to be capable of slightly more, because that way I'm not running at maximum 100% efficiency all the time. I'm doing a lot of waving my arms around. I haven't turned the camera on for quite some time. It's taken a bit of getting used to again. But obviously if I have this running constantly at its maximum output, it's going to get tired and worn out fast. This is an oilless compressor, so in theory maintenance is supposed to be not non-existent, which I would like, but that doesn't exist. But it's supposed to be a lot easier. So at the moment I have no idea how loud it is or how good the airflow or anything is going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'll very quickly move this out of the way. I will fire up my old compressor. We'll see how noisy that is, and I'll show you how quickly that runs out of air with something like a simple air sander. And then we'll give this one a test. I foresee this video taking a couple of months to fully film because I want to try out some sanding, I want to try out some spraying, and I want to see how it kind of copes slightly longer than just turning it on the day I've unboxed it and going, oh, isn't it a pretty shiny new toy? Because as much as everyone wants to see pretty shiny new toys, you can see that in loads of unboxing videos. I want to see how it performs slightly longer term. So with that being said, let's get this moved, and I will cut to me being sat back here with an incredibly noisy compressor going. Or I'll let it fill up first and then we'll see how long it takes to empty and things. So let's get this out of the way. So the old compressor is now full of air. It may kick in at any time and you won't be able to hear me because I currently have a very quick and dirty setup running air lines around the workshop because I haven't really had it plumbed in until recently. I will be fixing the lines properly and curing as many air leaks as possible. But if I grab a sander here and an airline here, there we go, then we'll see that you have to switch it on. The airflow from this sander can't quite keep up, so if I press the button, it's not really got enough power to do much. I stalled. There we go. So I stalled the sander quite easily there, and then the compressor kicked back in very quickly. I've got an app on my phone which tells me how loud it is, and it's at the opposite side of the workshop. It's buried under quite a lot of stuff, and it's still registering just over 90 decibels. So I think I'm gonna pull the lines, switch them over, put them onto the new RocwooD compressor, and we'll give that a test. And I think rather than fill it up straight away, what I'll do is I'll leave the camera running and we'll start it up, and I'll set a timer to see how long it takes to fill the 50-litre tank. So we may as well call this a bit of a review of the actual compressor whilst we're at it. See if it gives you any useful information if you're considering one in the future. So we're going to cut here and jump to the next bit. Right, so I am going to disappear again in a second because the compressor is the other side of my workbench. However, it's about 3 times closer than the other compressor was, and when it fires up I'll start a timer on the video and we'll see how long it takes. Should take me long enough to get back here. From what I've seen, it should be around, is it 1.5 minutes or 2.5 minutes? I'm not sure, we'll find out, and I won't have a clue until I edit the video, so we probably won't talk about that too much. But let's give that a try. So that's instantly a hell of a lot quieter. I'm currently reading, well, my voice is louder. I was reading 80 decibels. 78. It's not that loud. I'm going to be able to work a lot better with this going on. I'm also probably going to fast forward through this bit, so if I'm moving extra quickly and the timer's flying along, that's why. We'll see how long it takes. Okay, so it does take a little bit longer than the old 24 litre compressor to fill, but it's double the size, so it's going to do. I've still got a couple of air leaks in the system, but that's not too bad. So I'm going to have a play with the settings and try and set it as close to the same kind of pressure and everything as I had before, and then we'll have a look at how it works with the sander. So there'll be another cut here randomly, so back in a second. So I've had a play around. I've changed the output pressure and things. The sanders are rated for a maximum of 90 psi and they require around 11 CFM, which, well, the maximum they're going to want is usually about 11 CFM, which I think is cubic feet per minute. It's a lot there. That's the maximum rating of this particular compressor. If it struggles, then I could plumb in my other compressor as a backup for kind of heavy duty work like sanding, but I might not need to, we'll see. Hopefully I don't, because it's really noisy, as we've found out. So instead of sanding my bench, which you could probably see I've done quite a bit of here whilst testing the sander and the pressures, I'm going to sand this piece of Zebrano. This is a fairly old 180 disc. It's not amazing, but we'll see how it does. And in theory, because I've now got much more airflow, I shouldn't be able to stall the sander quite as easily, because there should be enough air to keep up. I should also have more consistent pressure. So I've reduced the pressure at the compressor on this one so that it's pushing a maximum of 100 psi through its regulator. It will fill to 116, which is the 8 bar mark. So there should be a little bit over, and let's see how it does. Hopefully it won't kick in instantly, but it should also keep up. So that kept up quite well. It didn't take too long to refill after using it. It didn't drop below about 80 psi, so that's not too bad. So I'm going to give it a quick test on this guitar body and see how it does. Hopefully it shouldn't bog down and cause me issues. That's not done too bad. Didn't bog down on there. It's given me quite a nice finish. Although I will say one of the best things about an air compressor is being able to do this. And clean off your work. So that's not a bad job at all. Now, I do have another air sander, which is a smaller sander. Ironically, the smaller sanders actually seem to use more air. And I can't remember what pad I've got on this, 120 on that. Now, these are quite useful for doing kind of smaller contours, and with a pad saver to add a bit of flexibility, you can do the transitions in necks and the heel and the headstock area quite nicely. But I'm going to give this one a quick test and see how this one does. So this sander's a bit more borderline. I think with a little bit of tweaking of the settings I can get it to work quite nicely, but it's kind of on the edge at the moment. Okay, so I tailed off and got a bit distracted there. I was messing around with the small sander, and basically I figured out that out of the box it was a bit scratchy and not very good, but it is a cheap budget, I think it was like 30 odd quid. So it was more kind of get something cheap to test whether the concept works before I fork out on something nicer and more expensive. It does work. I ended up stripping it down, kind of pulling out the air motor and just kind of spraying a bit of lube in there and stopping it being quite as juddery and scratchy. It's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better. So for sanding, this compressor, it won't keep up if I'm sanding non-stop for a few hours. It's going to struggle. If I'm doing little bits and pieces, I tend to do a lot of hand sanding, and then kind of the fine detail stuff I will do with an electric sander. So for what I use, it'll cope quite nicely. Long term, I'll give you a bit more information as I go along. But I think I'm gonna kind of stop this bit of the video now, and I'll reappear in a minute and I'll have thought of a new test for it. Not sure what it'll be yet, so let's see what future me has to say. So it's taken me a bit longer to record some more of this video than I was anticipating. You may also notice that the continuity of this video has now completely been ruined. I've absolutely gutted my workshop, which you may have seen in some other videos because the start of this video was recorded quite a while ago now. But I've had to rearrange. You've changed angle, and it's very strange talking to the camera at this angle. I'm just trying it out, see how it works. But basically, let's get back to the air compressor. I did all the sanding testing. I've used it to sand quite a lot of bodies now. What I've found is that the 50 litres is great. I, however, have daisy chained it to my previous compressor, which was a 25 litre. So I've now got 75 litres, and that worked better. It does take a little bit longer to fill the tanks, but that's fine. It's a lot quieter. I've used the compressors in tandem quite a few times. I've used it for blowing all sorts of dust off stuff. I've used it for clearing out the workshop. I've used it to pump up tyres on my cars. I've basically just gone nuts and used it for as many things as I possibly could. I then decided I needed to test it with spraying. So if you've watched the videos I did where I was spraying the burst on one of the graduate models, you may have seen it in action. If not, I'm going to put the footage of that in a second, just so you can see it in action. But it works well. The 50 litres is plenty enough to spray one guitar at a time. If I wanted to spray kind of bigger things or bigger panels, if for instance if I was doing amps or cars or anything else that I might have need to spray, I have a lot of projects on the go at any given time, then I'd probably turn on both compressors which I have done for a few times when I've been sanding. It keeps up far better than it needs to, but it is noisy. So I'm not going to turn it on again whilst I'm doing it, but the footage of the spraying should be coming up next, and you can see how well it does there. And then I'll kind of give it a bit of a sum up afterwards. So let's go back in time. So that was spraying the burst on the first of the graduates that I did. Since then I've sprayed clear coat on all three of the graduates. I sprayed colour and clear coat on 3 Black Swan models, which I'll stick some photos up around whilst I'm talking just so you can see what it's actually done. They've come out really nicely. All of them were sprayed with nitrocellulose, which doesn't really impact the choice of compressor, it's more the choice of spray gun, because the chemicals involved can degrade O-rings and things in certain spray guns. I went through a few friends that spray for a living and I got some recommendations, and they were all horrendously expensive. For the amount that I'm planning on using it, I didn't want to spend that kind of money at the moment. I mean, further down the line I probably will, because at the end of the day the finish is only ever going to be as good as the equipment, and good equipment makes it a lot easier to achieve its potential than crap equipment. So I did get a budget spray gun, but it was kind of the top end of the budget range, so it's usable and it works quite nicely. I'm not going to go into details about that because I did also get a small touch-up gun, because the spray pattern on the big gun is quite wide, and it was more for kind of wide coverage. So the touch-up gun that I've got is a much smaller nozzle. I think it's a 0.6 as opposed to a 1 or a 1.2. That just means I've got a bit more control over smaller things like that. I think that's the gun that I used to spray the burst. It's just a bit more controllable. So to sum up really, if I was to have a slightly bigger budget and be in a position to buy a compressor again, I'd probably go for 100 litres. Not so much for spraying, the spraying it copes absolutely fine with. It's more for sanding. When I was doing the batch of Phoenix Black Swans, I was working fully in a kind of 3 bodies, 3 necks, and that did push the compressor to its limits, which is why I decided to daisy chain the old compressor as a backup. So it's noisy with them both on, but if I stick my ear defenders on and I'm just in the work zone, it's not too bad. I've tucked them out of the way on the other side of my workshop, which I will show you a picture of them, and I think it's the first ever peek of that side of my workshop. Yeah, it's not that tidy, even though I gutted it and tidied it out not that long ago. But that's where they are, and they're tucked out of the way, and to be honest, I would recommend for kind of DIY home use especially, and a little bit into the kind of heavier use. This compressor is quite good. It's not loud, it's efficient, and as I say, I haven't had any problems so far with it. If I have problems, I'll be sure to update you all, but for now I shall stick a link in the description as to where I got it from. The prices have probably changed because, like I say, it's 8 to 9 months ago that I got mine. And that's about all there is for this video. Next video I should be making something again. It's been too long. I need to make stuff. Right, I'm off. It's really heavy.